just recently they verified the Shroud of Turin. Have you seen that?
I've been reading about it, and I know that there's some contention, there's some discussion and debate about it, but they used to think that it was only a couple hundred years old.
Yeah.
And now they've changed that.
Is the Shroud of Turin real, or is there any harm in believing that it's real? I personally believe that it is. But I know that there are good arguments against it. It's a cloth that a man who had been crucified was evidently buried in. You can see pictures of it very easily on the internet. As far as the arguments against it, most of them have to do with dating it back to, the 10th or 11th century. But there are aspects of it that can be dated back to the 1st century as well. We don't have a way to date something like this that is absolutely infallible. So that's certainly not the way to prove that it is authentic or real. Evidently was a man who was crucified, who had his side pierced, and what would cause the image of someone to wind up on a burial cloth? Could it be a bright light from the resurrection? We know it's not to be worshipped. We know it's not something that we are to make an idol out of. But I personally believe there's strong evidence for it being what Jesus was buried in. I also know there is not conclusive evidence on that, and I understand why a lot of people do not believe that. If you don't worship it, if you don't make an idol out of it, as we just said, then what harm could there be in just forming your own conclusions and believing that it is or it isn't the burial cloth of Jesus, even though the Bible doesn't even speak of him being wrapped in a complete burial cloth. He was wrapped in linens of some kind. And so the Bible does not eliminate the possibility that he was literally wrapped up his entire body in a burial cloth, if I'm remembering all that the Gospels teach on that. So there's no way to be sure, and certainly nothing wrong with believing that it is if that's what you believe. Don't make an idol out of anything. Keep yourselves from the love of idols, 1 John says, the last thing John told us in the book of 1 John. Keep yourself from idols. Worship only Jesus. But personally, I do think it's probably the burial cloth of Jesus.